Have you ever felt a really deeply specific, just profound emotion, or maybe you've experienced this incredibly complex social dynamic, and then
Yeah.
you realize there just simply isn't a word for it in English?
Oh, absolutely. It's the worst.
It is. You search your brain, you try to describe it to a friend, and you just end up waving your hand around saying, like, it's that feeling. Well,
You just trail off.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it begs the question, what happens to a feeling when it can't be named? Does it fade, or does it just kind of haunt you?
Well, that is exactly the threshold we're crossing today.
Right. So today, for this deep dive, we are answering that for you by jumping into the world of the Mysterium. We're specifically focusing on the hidden power of two incredibly unique frameworks from the source material.
The Elven Glossary and Seth's Lexicon of Neologisms.
Yes, exactly. And these texts, they operate on this core premise that words aren't just, labels we slap onto things after the fact.
No, not at all. They are active linguistic bridges.
Right, because there's that storyteller character in the sources, Sean Chai.
Sunshine, yes.
He says, and I love this quote, he says, "Words shape worlds." So our mission today is to explore how these highly specific terms map onto human struggles and how they offer you, listening right now, a totally new framework for viewing your own life.
It really is a profound psychological threshold to cross. Because when an experience lacks a linguistic container, it just remains amorphous.
Like a fog.
Exactly. If you, as the listener, are carrying around an unnamed grief or even an unnamed joy, you can feel it, but your cognitive architecture can't quite categorize it.
Can't put it in a box.
Right. You can't fully share it, and you certainly can't govern it. It remains this, well, a ghost in your psychological machinery.
A ghost in the machinery. I like that.
The hidden power of the Elven Glossary is that it treats language as a technology for reality making. By naming a feeling, you drag it from the abstract right into the tangible realm.
Okay, so I want to look at how that technology actually builds a person from the ground up. Because, before you can shape the world around you, you have to forge yourself,
I'm
right?
going to start with the self, yeah.
And the Elven Glossary provides this striking, just visceral vocabulary for personal transformation. The term that caught my attention first is minyolomi.
Ah, minyolomi.
Could you unpack the etymology of that for us and maybe how it functions in the lore?
Absolutely. So the linguistic roots of minyolomi are fascinating. It combines the Quenya-like word minya,
Which means?
which translates roughly to first or new,
Okay.
and lomi, which means twilight or dusk. So conceptually, it translates to the Twilight Forge.
The Twilight Forge. So cool. But it's not like an actual physical blacksmith shop.
No, it isn't a physical place. It refers to the artful, really deliberate process of transforming raw material through extreme conditions.
To enhance it.
Exactly, to enhance its functionality and its resilience. It is a highly controlled metamorphosis. And to understand how the text illustrates this, we really have to look at the character of Finn.
Right, Finn the blacksmith.
Yes. The sources spend just a massive amount of time detailing his process of forging a single sword.
I was actually reading that passage and wondering, why did the author dedicate so many pages to just the mechanics of hitting metal with a hammer?
Right. It feels a bit much at first glance.
Yeah. What is the deeper philosophy Finn is actually demonstrating there?
Finn isn't just pounding metal. He is engaged in this sacred orchestration of heat and trauma.
Heat and trauma, okay.
The text describes him heating high-carbon steel until it reaches a very specific, blinding white-hot temperature.
Like, he can read the heat?
Exactly. And then he strikes it in this practiced descending sequence. He starts with the heaviest hammer to draw out the shades.
And works his way down?
Right, down to the lightest hammer just to refine the edge. But the critical moment of minyolomi is the quench.
Oh, when he dunks it in the water.
Yes, he plunges this fiery, glowing steel into freezing water. The text notes how the steam hisses up like dragon's breath. And it explicitly points out that this violent shock of cooling is the only way to expose the hidden flaws within the metal.
Wait, really? The cooling exposes the flaws?
Yes. If the blade survives the quench without shattering, the crystalline structure inside the steel forms rapidly. That determines its ultimate unbreakable strength.
Wow.
And as Finn works, he mutters this mantra to himself. Tempered patience strengthens the tempered edge.
I love that. Tempered patience.
He is applying the physical laws of metallurgy directly to the spiritual laws of character.
That makes so much sense when you bring it into, our everyday physical reality. Like if you are listening to this and you've ever spent time in a gym, Minyalomi is the exact spiritual equivalent of lifting heavy weights.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Or like intense endurance training. When you lift a weight that pushes you to your absolute limit, you aren't just getting stronger by magic.
No, you're doing damage.
Right. You are literally tearing your muscle fibers. You are deliberately subjecting your own body to a controlled, extreme environment.
You're choosing the forge.
Exactly. You break your physical material down so that it is forced to rebuild itself denser and more resilient than it was before.
It's biological Minyalomi.
Yeah, it's like the Japanese concept of kaizen, continuous improvement, but applied directly to the human soul through the fires of chosen adversity.
That physical mechanism is the perfect way to visualize it. You're intentionally choosing the resistance to forge your own capacity.
Right.
Minyalomi demands exposure to extreme conditions because, well, philosophically speaking, the raw material of a human being only reveals its true capacity under duress.
Because things are easy when they're easy.
Exactly. The hidden flaws in your character, the impatience, the cowardice, the arrogance, they have to be exposed by the shock of reality.
The quench.
The quench,
Yeah.
so they could be addressed. If you avoid the forge, you just remain raw, untested material.
But once you go through that, right, once you endure the quench and your crystalline structure is set, the text suggests that you unlock a completely new kind of perception.
You do.
And the glossary has these two deeply interconnected terms for this aftermath, kalakali and nesanari.
Yes, two beautiful concepts.
Walk us through what those mean for someone who has just, survived their own personal Twilight Forge.
Okay, so these two concepts represent the immediate reward of that tempering process. Kalakali, which is derived from kala for light and kali for rising, translates to the ascending lantern.
The ascending lantern.
Right. It defines a very singular, profound moment of clarity. It is the exact instant when an individual penetrates deceptions or societal lies or even just their own self-doubt.
So it's an epiphany.
Yes, to embrace their authentic truth. It is the literal shattering of an illusion, and it is inextricably linked to nesanari,
Which is?
the lotus flame, from nessa, meaning fresh or young, and neri, flame.
Lotus flame. So how do they connect?
Well, if kalakali is the flash of realization, the lantern turning on nesanari is the transformative, sustained growth that follows it.
Oh, I see.
It is described much like a lotus flower, rising from murky, suffocating mud to finally bloom in the open air.
The narrative actually provides a brilliant showcase of this with the character of Estrilda.
Oh, the orphanage sequence, yes.
Right, the young girl who eventually becomes Alice. Could you pull apart the mechanics of her scene in the woods? Because on the surface, honestly, it just reads like a spooky story about a girl running away from an orphanage.
It does read that way at first, but the psychological layering in that scene is profound.
Right, so set the stage for us.
So, Estrilda is fleeing this terribly abusive orphanage. And the other children, and especially the matrons, have controlled her entirely through narrative.
Through scary stories.
Exactly. They filled her head with terrifying tales of monsters and demons out in the western woods, essentially using scaremongering to keep her paralyzed and compliant.
So she wouldn't run away.
Right. So she finally escapes. She's deep in these pitch-black woods, and her nervous system is just in overdrive. She hears a sudden scurrying sound in the brush.
The classic horror movie setup.
Exactly. She freezes. Her heart is pounding against her ribs. She is bracing for the monster she has been conditioned to expect her entire life.
And in
The brush parts, and out waddles a plump, curious little opossum.
just a little trash cat.
Yes. It just blinks at her, sniffs the air, and waddles away into the dark.
And that tiny, almost comical anticlimax, that is the trigger for her transformation.
It is the absolute catalyst for her calicalia.
Really, just the opossum.
Because in that fraction of a second, watching this harmless little animal, she realizes that the terrifying stories were nothing but manipulation.
Oh, wow.
The monsters were fictions designed to build a cage in her mind, and the illusion just shatters completely.
The ascending lantern.
Yes, that piercing of the deception is the ascending lantern. And immediately after, she comes to a literal fork in the road.
The signposts.
Right. One wooden sign points to Ravenwood, the other points to Middlewich. She takes a breath, she sheds her given name of Estrilda, chooses to call herself Alice, and steps onto the path toward Middlewich.
She claims her new identity.
That decisive step, totally free from the weight of her past conditioning, that is the blooming of nesanari.
When I think about how you or I might experience that today, it sounds a lot like stripping away imposter syndrome.
Or family expectations, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And I know the philosophical sources in the stack connect this to a much older concept.
They do. The texts map this directly onto the ancient philosophical practice of neti neti.
Neti neti, what does that mean?
It's a Sanskrit expression that translates to not this, not this.
Not this, not this.
Oh.
Yeah.
It is an analytical meditation used to understand the nature of reality by methodically negating false identifications. You find your true self by aggressively identifying what you are not.
Oh, so Alice is essentially practicing neti neti in the woods. She realizes, I am not the helpless victim of the orphanage. Not this. I am not the frightened girl the matrons told me I was. Not this.
I am not even Estrelda anymore. Not this.
Right. She chips away everything that isn't the statue, and the statue is what remains.
And that remaining consciousness is incredibly potent. But, that raises a massive question for our listener.
What's that?
Well, if you have just spent all this time in the Twilight Forge, and you have stripped away your illusions to find your authentic self, what happens when you step out into the world and collide with someone else who has done the exact same thing, but their authentic truth directly opposes yours?
Right. You can't just exist in a vacuum. You have to navigate a chaotic world filled with other people.
Exactly.
And this is where the glossary provides a framework for the architecture of connection. It gives us a term for navigating conflict that honestly sounds a bit utopian at first glance.
Which one?
Asimandil, the knots in a net.
Ah, the mandil. It is a beautiful phrase.
What's the root of it?
It's derived from asia, meaning helpfulness or kindness, and mandal, meaning friend. Asia mandal is a highly principled, disciplined approach to building consensus.
Okay, principled how?
Well, it dictates that good faith dialogue and the preservation of the relationship are ultimately more important than achieving total ideological victory.
Or individual supremacy.
Right. It's the recognition that you are both knots in the same net. If you cut the other knot to free yourself, you destroy the integrity of the whole structure.
The sources give us a really tense narrative example of this with Lady Eleanor.
The bridge scene.
Yes, the bridge scene. So for context, she holds the title of Protector of the Kingdom. She's leading this small band of heroes, and they need to cross a specific stone bridge in the western woods.
But it's blocked.
Right, it is blocked by a heavily armed clan of goblins. And the goblin leader, Scriabin, he isn't just standing there peacefully.
He's agitating?
Yeah, he is actively taunting them, insulting Eleanor, brandishing these wicked, curved falk swords.
Just trying to get a reaction.
Exactly. And Emma, who is one of Eleanor's companions, she immediately reaches for her weapon. She's ready to just hack their way across.
Understandably so.
But Eleanor raises her hand and physically stops her. She leans on something called her 5 vows. What exactly is Eleanor doing here strategically?
Well, strategically, she is refusing to let the adversary dictate the terms of engagement. I mean, Eleanor possesses vastly superior military force.
Right, she could wipe them out.
She could easily slaughter the goblins and cross the bridge. But she anchors herself to her 5 vows.
Which are?
To show mercy, to remain truthful, to take only what is freely given, to maintain purity of thought, and to live simply.
So she uses those as a grounding mechanism.
Exactly. And through observation, she realizes something crucial. The goblins aren't blocking the bridge out of malice.
No.
No, they are acting out of pure terror.
Oh, because of the orcs.
Right. They have been violently displaced from their own homes by a horde of advancing orcs, and they are terrified of this larger dark power moving through the woods. Scriabin's aggression is just a mask for his vulnerability.
A defense mechanism.
So Eleanor practices asimenedo. She engages Scriabin diplomatically. She acknowledges his fear without mocking it and manages to negotiate safe passage without spilling a single drop of blood.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back on this entirely.
Go for it.
Because if you are listening to this and you are dealing with a toxic coworker who is actively trying to sabotage your career, or you are facing a genuine real-world threat in your life, Asia sounds incredibly naive.
It does sound like appeasement on paper.
It sounds like a high fantasy way of saying, can't we all just hold hands and get along? How does this philosophy actually survive contact with reality when someone is standing in your way, holding a metaphorical or literal weapon, and trying to destroy you?
That is the most common and honestly most valid critique of diplomacy. If Asimandil were simply pacifism or appeasement, you would be absolutely right. It would be a suicide pact.
Right. So how is it not?
To understand why Eleanor's actions aren't naive, We have to pull a concept from Seth's lexicon of neologisms. Axophil.
Well, yes.
Yes. Axil is defined as a state of being held in creative tension.
Creative tension.
It describes a system, a relationship, or even a society that thrives because of its contradictions and conflicts, not in spite of them.
Oh, interesting.
True consensus, true asimandel, is never the erasure of disagreement. It isn't asking the toxic coworker to suddenly be your best friend.
So the goal isn't to make the tension disappear.
Never. The source text on this, titled Formed Resonance, uses the mechanics of a stringed instrument to explain this.
Like a guitar.
Like a cello. Think of a cello. If you take a cello string and remove all the tension so it just hangs loose and limp, what happens when you draw a bow across it?
Nothing. It just makes a sad scraping noise.
Exactly. It is utterly useless. The tension is an absolute physical prerequisite for the creation of music.
Oh, I see where you're going.
If a hunter's bow has no resistance and tension, it cannot fire an arrow to feed the family. Tension is stored energy.
Wow, okay.
Eleanor does not look at the goblins and try to erase their hostility. She doesn't pretend their goals perfectly align.
She doesn't become best friends with Scriabin.
No. She acknowledges the extreme friction of the standoff, but she searches for the proper harmonic of that tension so they can move forward without snapping the string.
She tunes the conflict.
Exactly, she tunes it. A C-Mandel is the rigorous discipline of finding the axophil state. It is learning how to navigate friction without letting it ignite into a forest fire.
That reframes conflict entirely for me. The tension is the point. It's the engine that allows movement, as long as it is tuned correctly.
Precise.
But you know, the architecture of connection in these texts isn't just about managing enemies or hostile standoffs. The glossary spends just as much time on the quieter, warmer mechanics of human bonding.
The sustaining bonds, yes.
And there are two terms that seem to represent two very different types of love. Romuloidy and Ormelie.
They are two sides of the same coin of human connection. Let's start with Romuloidy.
Yeah,
It translates to the winged anchor.
Winged anchor. That's poetic.
It is the unfailing, dramatic support in turbulent times. It is the friend who stands shoulder to shoulder with you when your life is literally falling apart.
The foxhole friend.
Exactly. Psychologically, we know that braving a severe tempest together, surviving shared trauma or extreme stress, it forges an incredibly dense chemical and emotional bond.
Right, you survived the Twilight Forge together. But the other term, Ormelia, it feels so much more accessible to everyday life.
It is. Ormelie means the heart-woven basket,
Heart-woven basket.
derived from ore for heart and meli for love. If Romuloidy is the loud, dramatic loyalty forged in a crisis, Ormelie is the quiet, daily, almost mundane maintenance of love through service and shared sustenance.
There is a scene that perfectly illustrates the profound nature of this mundane love. The narrative takes us to a bakery.
Ah, Sam and Emily.
Right, with three characters, Sam the baker, his wife Emily, and their dear friend Mary. And they aren't fighting goblins, they aren't saving the world, they're literally just baking bread.
But the text elevates it.
It does. It treats it with the same reverence as a religious ceremony. They are in this sweltering, flour-dusted room. Emily is insisting on exact measurements, arguing that baking is a science of ratios, not guesswork.
The meticulousness is key.
Yeah, they meticulously mix the dough, let it rise, and pull these golden brown, crackling loaves from the stone hearth. They slice the hot bread, spread it with thick butter, and sit by the fire to eat it with tea.
Sounds so peaceful.
It is. On paper, it's just a Tuesday afternoon. But the text tells us that these small, meticulous things, done with great love, yield the greatest harvest. The physical act of baking and sharing that bread is Ormelie.
It is the physical weaving of their friendship. And for the listener, this is a crucial diagnostic tool for your own relationships.
How so?
Both Romuloidy and Ormelie are required to build a resilient human ecology. You need the friends who will fly into the storm as your winged anchor, but you also desperately need the people who will just sit in a hot kitchen and meticulously measure flour with you.
That balance is so important.
If you only have crisis friends, your life is perpetual exhaustion. If you only have fair weather friends, your life shatters at the first sign of a storm.
That is so true. But what happens when the tension of life isn't creative? We talked about tuning the cello string, but what happens when you pull that string so tight it just snaps across your face?
The darker side of the glossary.
Yeah, because the glossary also provides a highly specific vocabulary for the darker, deeply frustrating corners of human psychology. And this is where I think these sources get incredibly relatable. Let's look at the cognitive burden of the unknown. Indokuma and Hlamista.
These two terms map the internal architecture of frustration beautifully. Indokuma translates to the crescent void.
The crescent void.
Yes. It describes a very specific, agonizing inability to articulate a deep intellectual or spiritual insight, because the language you possess is simply inadequate.
Like your brain is failing you?
Right. You have grasped a profound truth in your mind. You can feel the shape of it, but the words fail you.
I always compare this to having a word on the tip of your tongue. If you are listening to this, you know that maddening feeling where you are trying to remember the name of an actor in a movie.
Oh, it drives you crazy.
Yeah, you can picture their face. You know, they were in that one romantic comedy 10 years ago. The name is right there, but your brain flat out refuses to hand over the file. It's an itch you can't scratch.
Exactly.
But with Indokuma, instead of it being an actor's name, it is the meaning of your own existence, or the solution to a massive crisis.
Is the tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon scaled up to an existential crisis. As the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein suggested, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world.
Oh, that's a great quote.
When you experience Indokuma, you have hit the absolute edge of your reality's resolution, and when that frustration lingers, it ferments into lonmista.
The labyrinthine echo.
Yes. This is the disquieting resonance of an unresolved question that echoes through your daily thoughts like footsteps in a stone maze. You can't solve the puzzle, but you are completely incapable of putting it down.
The sources show us exactly what this looks like in practice with Emma and Peter. They are sitting in a loud, crowded tavern called the Jolly Bear.
Trying to work?
Yeah, and they are agonizing over a coded letter. Emma found this parchment on the body of a fallen orc warlord named Grag. They know it contains the plans of the dark power moving through the woods, but it's written in this bizarre lunar astral script that looks like constellations.
It's totally alien to them.
Completely. They spend hours trying alphabetical substitutions, reading it upside down, holding it up to the candlelight. Nothing works. Emma gets so frustrated she actually mimics ripping the parchment in half.
The physical frustration.
They aren't just annoyed by a puzzle, they're suffering from Indokuma. The meaning is staring them in the face, but they lack the linguistic bridge to reach it.
And then Peter's reaction.
Right. The impending threat of whatever that letter contains becomes Peter's lonmista. It haunts him to the point where he loses days in the library, just staring out the window, totally paralyzed by the loose threads he can't tie together.
That paralysis is the true danger of the labyrinthine echo. Now imagine taking that intense, unresolved cognitive burden, that Indokuma, and applying it not just to one person, but to an entire society.
Ah, boy.
When a group of people experiences collective frustration, economic hardship, or fear they cannot articulate, it often metastasizes into a much darker social phenomenon. The glossary calls this hemiakoimi.
The shattered mirror. This is, hands down, one of the most vital concepts in the entire stack for understanding the modern world.
Absolutely. Hemiakoimi is the sociological process of scapegoating.
Scapegoating.
Yes. It defines how a group, driven by internal rivalry, unresolved stress and fear, collectively displaces the responsibility for its own systemic failures onto a designated, often marginalized victim.
So they blame someone else.
They shatter the mirror because they are entirely unwilling to look at their own reflection and acknowledge their own complicity in the harm.
Dimble the Goblin gives us a masterclass on how this works.
His campfire story.
Right. He is sitting around a campfire with the heroes, recounting the history of the great wars between the goblins and the orcs. They were fighting over these incredibly resource-rich copper mines.
Greed, basically.
Yeah. Dimple describes how both sides got puffed up with pride. The war was brutal and endless, entire villages burned to the ground, families scattered, ancient forests reduced to ash. But the real tragedy, Dimple points out, is that both sides blamed the other entirely for the devastation.
A total lack of self-awareness.
Exactly. The goblins insisted the orcs were hulking, mindless brutes destroying the peace. The orcs viewed the goblins as treacherous, thieving pests. Neither side would admit for a second that their own insatiable greed and arrogant pride were the actual fuel for the fire.
So they shattered the mirror.
They scapegoated each other so they wouldn't have to look at the ashes of their own making.
What Dimble's story reveals is the mechanics of how tension is manipulated by those in power. The philosophical text Formed Resonance has a whole chapter warning against manufactured dissonance.
Manufactured dissonance? What's that?
This is tension that is deliberately engineered or prolonged by leaders for their own strategic advantage.
Which brings us to Faye, the shape-shifting witch in the narrative.
Precisely. Fey is the ultimate architect of manufactured dissonance. A corrupt leader knows that if they can keep their followers in a state of perpetual anxiety, anger, and fear of the other, those followers will never question the leader's authority.
Right, because they need the leader to protect them.
Their protection becomes indispensable. If the goblins and orcs are terrified of each other, they don't look at their own warlords who are profiting from the copper mines.
Wow.
Scapegoating hemiaquemi is the primary weapon of manufactured dissonance.
Mhm.
It acts as a release valve, channeling all the internal frustration of a society onto a convenient target, ensuring the real architects of the chaos remain comfortably in power.
That is painfully relevant.
If you are listening to this, you can likely identify a dozen instances of manufactured dissonance in the media you consume daily, where your anger is being intentionally curated.
Right. So if we can use the glossary to diagnose the disease, if we can identify the scapegoating and the manufactured dissonance, what is the cure? How do we find harmony again when the string has snapped?
We have to look outward.
Right, because the glossary extends its hidden power beyond human society and looks at how we relate to the natural world and the passage of time itself. Let's explore Yondalinde and Symphoria.
Yondalinde translates to the resonant grove.
The resonant
It represents the profound, harmonious rhythm of an undisturbed natural environment. It is an ecosystem where every single element, the root systems of the trees, the mycelium in the soil, the migratory patterns of the animals, the seasonal weather, it all operates in an intricate, perfectly balanced interplay.
So it's nature in perfect balance.
It is a state of natural grace that invites the human observer to quiet their own ego and attune themselves to the interconnectedness of life.
And Symphoria.
Symphoria, a term from Seth's Lexicon, is the exact breathtaking moment when two or more separate melodies lock into a sudden harmony, creating a resonance that neither could achieve alone.
We get this beautiful, quiet, narrative example of Jack and Sophia hunting in the woods.
Oh, that scene is gorgeous.
It really is. They step into the forest at dawn, and their approach is entirely different from an invading army. They don't try to conquer the woods, they read it.
They listen to it.
Yeah, Sophia observes a single broken twig or a microscopic imprint in the damp soil, and she knows exactly what passed by. They move in perfect, silent synchrony. A slight tilt of Jack's head, a brief touch on Sophia's arm, and they communicate volumes without a sound.
That's Symphoria.
Right. They are experiencing Symphoria, their individual melodies locking together into a unified chord, while physically moving through the Yondalinde, the resonant grove. They have completely surrendered their human arrogance to the rhythm of the forest.
The text calls that surrender symbiocadence. But to truly understand the value of the resonant grove, the sources provide a sharp, heartbreaking contrast to show what happens when that rhythm is violently and selfishly ruptured.
Symbol the rabbit. I have to admit, reading this section was genuinely difficult.
It is intended to be devastating. Thimble is a young, naive rabbit living in a thriving warren. He sees some human trappers enter the woods, and in his innocence, he hops up to greet them, hoping to share a few words or observe them.
Because he doesn't know any better.
Exactly. Instead, the trappers instantly drop nets. Thimble's entire family is violently snared, muzzled, and thrown into iron cages on a cart.
Just horrible.
Thimble only manages to escape days later when his specific cage rattles off the cart at an auction block. He flees frantically back to the woods, navigating entirely by instinct, desperate for the safety of his home.
But when he gets there.
When he arrives, his warren is utterly empty. The silence of that abandoned burrow is the physical manifestation of the violent destruction of Yondalinde.
The rupture of the harmony.
It is the blind extraction of life, without any respect for the harmonious rhythm. It serves as a stark, uncompromising reminder of what happens when a dominant species views the resonant grove merely as a warehouse of resources to be plundered for profit.
It's the ultimate tragedy of losing that connection, and it brings up a really heavy question. With all of this rupture, with the scapegoating, the violence, the loss of the warren, how does anyone ever actually move forward? How do we heal?
That leads into the broader philosophical framework.
Right. This brings us to a major philosophical theme from the text regarding time, trauma, and growth. The sources outline the concept of chronomnesis, or the spiral of emergence, driven by a force called indoturi.
Indoturi, the ascendant spiral, is defined as the primordial, unstoppable force that propels a conscious being toward self-mastery.
Okay, ascendant spiral.
But the mechanics of how this growth happens is what makes the philosophy so unique. The text argues fiercely against the idea that time and experience are a straight line.
Like a timeline.
Right. You do not just march from point A to point Z, neatly leaving the past behind you. Life, according to the Mysterium, is a spiral. You continually return to the exact same events, the same emotional struggles, the same seasons of life, over and over again.
Okay, I have to push back on this because if I am listening to this and analyzing my own life, this sounds incredibly depressing.
I can feel that way, yeah.
If we keep looping back to the same struggles, like if I keep dealing with the same overwhelming wave of grief for someone I lost, or if I keep having the exact same argument with my partner about communication, or if society keeps falling for the same manufactured dissonance, doesn't that mean we are actually growing?
Feels like a trap.
It doesn't feel like an ascendant spiral. It feels like I'm stuck on a hamster wheel. How do I know I'm not just failing repeatedly?
It is the most natural human reaction to feel that way when the familiar pain returns. But a wheel is flat. A spiral has elevation.
Oh, a spiral has elevation. Okay.
To explain how you know you are growing, the philosophy of formed resonance uses a concept called a music theory tree.
Music theory.
Yes. Imagine you are sitting at a piano and you play a standard C major scale, the Ionian mode. You start your sum on middle C and you play D, E, F, G, A, B, and finally your pinky lands on the next C.
Right, an octave.
From a strictly technical standpoint, that final note is the same pitch class as the first note. But musically, emotionally, and acoustically, it means something entirely different.
Because it's an octave higher. It contains the resonance of the whole scale.
Exactly. You have returned to the same note, but in a new octave. When you face that recurring argument with your partner, or when that wave of grief washes over you on the anniversary of a loss, you are indeed returning to the C note.
But I'm different.
You are facing the same fundamental human problem. But you are not the same person who faced it the first time. You bring with you the memory, the emotional scars, the vocabulary, and the lessons of the entire journey of the intervening notes.
Wow.
The center of your life now contains the memory of every departure. You aren't stuck in a circle, repeating your failures. You are ascending the spiral, encountering the same truths with an expanded capacity to understand them.
That completely changes the paradigm of how I view recurring problems. It's not a failure that the problem came back. It's an opportunity to play the note in a new octave.
Exactly. You're further up the spiral.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this entire deep dive. We've talked about forging the self in the twilight, connecting with others through creative tension, surviving the darkness of the unsayable, and harmonizing with the spiral of time. What is the ultimate purpose of gaining this hidden power? What is the point of all this mastery?
The central non-negotiable pillar of the formed resonance philosophy is the ethical law of return.
The ethical law of return.
The text states unequivocally that the highest ascent is return.
Meaning?
This means that any ascent you make in your life, whether you achieve a state of profound, deep meditation, make a world-changing scientific breakthrough, gain massive political power, or literally slay a dragon to claim a hoard of gold, is morally incomplete if you remain at the summit.
You can't just stay on the mountain.
Insight and power must eventually descend back to the ordinary world. The journey is only fully realized when the knowledge returns as service to others, as repaired injury, and as tangible care for your community.
We see this principle embodied perfectly by the dragon, Smedley.
Ah, Smedley, the scholar dragon.
Yes. Smedley is the one who intercepts that coded lunar astral letter from a flock of thieving crows. He is high up on his mountain perch, the sun is setting, and he uses his ancient intellect to read this script. He discovers the massive kingdom-ending plot engineered by the Dark Power.
A huge revelation.
Right. Now look at Smedley's position. He is an ancient, powerful dragon. He doesn't need human society. He could have easily kept this knowledge to himself, flown off to a higher peak, and simply watched while the humans, goblins, and orcs destroyed each other in the valleys below.
He had every right to just walk away.
But he doesn't. He immediately launches from his perch, flies down to the bustling, chaotic village square, seeks out Lady Eleanor, and shares the intelligence. He acts as a Calantirno.
Granite lighthouse.
Yes, the glossary defines Calantirno as the quality of persevering through immense darkness and isolation, specifically to serve as a beacon of hope and guidance for those lost in the storm. Smedley takes the supreme ascent of his ancient, deciphered knowledge and voluntarily returns it to the world as an act of service.
A perfect harmonic return.
And we see another facet of this law of return with the character known only as the Old Man of the Forest. Peter and the heroes are on a desperate quest, and they find this ancient, deeply composed man living in a grove, surrounded by fiercely protective wild animals.
The heart's desire scene.
Right. Peter asks him for directions to an incredibly rare, mythical herb called the heart's desire.
And the old man's response is the ultimate subversion of the standard hero's journey.
Exactly. The old man basically looks at Peter and tells him that finding the herb is irrelevant. Anyone can find it if they walk long enough. The only thing that matters is what you do with it once it is in your hands.
It's all about the application.
He warns Peter that the herb acts as an amplifier. It responds entirely to the core intentions of the possessor. If your intentions are pure and aimed at service, the herb brings miraculous healing and change. But if your desires are rooted in cruelty, selfishness, or vengeance, the magic instantly warps into a devastating curse.
It mirrors the soul.
The quest itself isn't the point of the story. The application of the quest's reward upon returning home is the entire point.
That is the ultimate test of reality for any seeker of knowledge. The philosophical text declared that the summit of absolute certainty was to eventually be discarded for a blank book and an observatory.
A blank book and an observatory.
Meaning, the true value of your intellectual or spiritual journey is not judged by how many facts you know or how high you climbed. It is judged by whether you return from the mountain more capable of fulfilling ordinary vital duties, like washing a sick neighbor's wound, meticulously baking bread for your friends, or possessing the humility to sit in an observatory and allow your mind to be changed by new stars.
Which brings up a fascinating, dark contrast I noticed in the lore between two different entities who undergo massive trials. The ancient dragon Tehom and Lady Eleanor.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
If we look at Tehom, she is discovered through a memorial in a lost, ruined village. The lore tells us she was held captive behind a magical dam for centuries, enduring unimaginable isolation and pain.
Horrific torture, essentially.
Yeah. When the dam finally breaks and she returns to the world, the text explicitly labels it a corrupted return. She emerges with a chilling, single-minded promise of revenge. Her memory has calcified around the humiliations of her confinement. Her return to the world is entirely destructive. She just wants to burn the valleys that forgot her.
She returns only to extract a bloody payment for her suffering. She demands that the world bleed because she bled.
But then compare that to Eleanor's trial at Lake Luminea.
The nightmare sequence.
Eleanor is trapped in this terrifying, paralyzing nightmare beside the lake. The dark power forces her to confront her deepest, most primal fears. The fury of the storm, the mockery of a phantom queen, and the crushing, suffocating guilt of all the soldiers who have died under her command.
Her own Twilight Forge.
Exactly. She is completely immobilized in the freezing mud, experiencing her own Twilight Forge. But when she finally wakes up and breaks the paralysis, she experiences what the text calls a harmonic return. She doesn't lash out at her companions in displaced anger. She doesn't succumb to the darkness and abandon her quest.
She bears the weight.
She chooses to process the immense trauma, absorb the grief, and continue protecting her people without giving an inch to wrath.
The dividing line between Tehom's corrupted return and Eleanor's harmonic return is governed by one final crucial concept from the glossary: Nureanwe.
Break that down for us because it feels like the key to the entire philosophy.
It is the linchpin of the Elven mindset, derived from Nure, meaning deep, and Anwe, meaning true being. Nureanwe signifies a state of profound, unshakable spiritual humility and ruthless, honest self-reflection. Tehom, despite her ancient power, completely lacked Nureanwe. She possessed only a bottomless well of wounded pride. Her ego demanded satisfaction. Eleanor, however, possesses the immense humility required to face her own internal nightmares, to acknowledge her perceived failures as a leader, and to accept total accountability without letting the weight of shame destroy her capacity to act.
So it's about holding power gently.
The sources are telling us that true leadership, true mastery of the self, requires this profound humility. The highest summit you can reach isn't a throne where you demand obedience from the world. It's the blank book, the courageous willingness to admit you don't know everything, and the readiness to write a new, better chapter in service to the people around you.
So as we pull all of these threads together, what does this massive stack of lore, linguistics, and philosophy actually mean for you, the listener? Let's unpack the synthesis of this entire journey.
Let's do it.
The hidden power of the Elven Glossary and Seth's Lexicon isn't just that they provide cool, high fantasy magic words to memorize. It is that they offer you a literal constitution for your attention.
A constitution for your attention. That is a brilliant way to frame it.
By giving us exact, dedicated terms for the most nebulous human experiences, these texts prevent us from being swept away by the overwhelming chaos of modern life.
They give us anchors.
Think about it. When society starts blaming a marginalized group for its complex economic problems, you, as the listener, don't have to just feel vaguely uneasy or helpless about it. You can point directly at the television or the social media feed and say, that is himyakoimi. That is the shattered mirror of scapegoating manufactured by leaders to keep me afraid.
And when you and a friend brave a horrible personal crisis together, a sudden illness, a financial collapse, you can recognize that shared survival as Romaloidy, the winged anchor, and know with certainty that your bond is structurally stronger for having survived the forge.
When you are sitting in a meeting at work or at a family dinner table and the air is thick with disagreement, you don't have to panic and try to force everyone into a false smiling agreement. You can recognize the axethol, the creative tension in the room, and you can tune it like a cello string to make music out of the friction.
Exactly.
These words are not just lore, they are psychological tools for survival, resilience, and flourishing in a world that constantly tries to untune you.
And as the storyteller Sean Chai learned in his travels, and as he desperately tried to impart to anyone who would listen around the fire, you are not a passive receiver of reality.
You're not just a victim of circumstance.
No, you do not just walk blindly through a pre-written world, suffering whatever happens to you. You are both the weaver and the thread.
The weaver and the thread.
The words you consciously choose to adopt, the specific vocabulary you use to frame your daily struggles, your recurring griefs, and your deepest joys, dictate the very borders of the reality you inhabit. The space between the words is where the great mystery of life lives, but the words themselves are the stepping stones you place to cross the void.
You are both the weaver and the thread. That is an idea I am going to be chewing on for a very long time.
That's a lot to process.
It is. So to wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you listening right now with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
A parting thought.
We started this journey by talking about that haunting, isolating feeling of not having a word for a highly specific emotion. I want you to look closely at the tensions, the profound joys, and the recurring octave-jumping conflicts in your own life right now. Look at the people you rely on in a crisis, and look at the unresolved questions that keep you awake staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m.
The labyrinthine echoes.
Exactly. Which of those vital experiences currently lacks a name? And how might finding the exact right word for it, forging your own linguistic bridge, entirely change the reality you live in?
Until you name the ghost, it governs you from the shadows. But the moment you name it, you drag it into the light, and you can begin to govern it.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you for taking this deep dive into the Mysterium with us. We'll catch you on the next one.